the gate of the city, and they had the ceremony of the shoe, which was interesting. And we had, take a look at Ruth 4:11. This is after Boaz and so agree, and that Ruth is going to be Boaz's wife, and carry on Mahlon's, I don't know what you call it, any family. So they'll, verse 11, and all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Let the house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. And what I'd like to look at is why these women, why Rachel first and then Leah, when Leah sure did have a lot more children than Rachel did. Why Tamar and Judah, when that, I mean, these are not blessings of marriage. You know, you would say, I hope my marriage is as good as my grandma's, but you know, these women, these are not great marriages. You know, so why Rachel and Leah, and why Rachel first and not Leah first? And you can unmute.
Liz, I'm a little surprised at Rachel and Leah initially being included. Partly, I mean, the whole lead up to that is that Ruth is an outsider. The woman is
Yes.
coming into your household. But Rachel and Leah were from the family unit. That was the whole point of going back to Haran, was to take wives from within their family unit. This is very different, so the comparison doesn't seem to match up much at all.
And yes, it doesn't, and it's the whole thing about Ruth is that she is an outsider.
I wonder if it's a way to show their full acceptance of Ruth as one of them, as far as the family of the Abraham faith family.
Yeah, making her a daughter of matriarchs. You know, just bringing her in to say, okay, she's one of us now. And another thing might be that she is a second wife, and that's why it was like those two. For Boaz to be an older man.
It seems to me that since Rachel and Leah were the mothers of the whole 12 tribes of Israel, you know, that would be enough to give them the...
Oh, okay, that would be enough to just say, put that as part of the blessing.
I would think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It certainly shows how acceptable it is for these people for a Moabite woman to be taken in and married to an Israelite man. It doesn't seem to be anything. There's no protest. There's no objection that's recorded. It seems like she's totally accepted.
I think so too. And putting Rachel first, maybe she's the loved one. because Rachel was not, well, she was the first choice, but she wasn't the first wife. So,
Well, I'm pretty sure we still put Rachel first when we mention Rachel and Leah. I mean, I think that's come down not out of here, I don't think, but I think our natural tendency is to put Rachel first, because she
Yeah.
was the favored. Poor Leah.
I know.
But the interesting thing is, it's Leah who is the mother of Judah and the tribe of
Yeah.
Judah. This is who we're dealing with here, and so
Just fun to talk about, you know.
Another connection between Ruth and Rachel and Leah is that Rachel and Leah had some affinity to idol gods. You know, Rachel snuck out the household gods, and but now
Brilliant maneuver.
we assume that she learned better.
Yeah.
You know, to build on Barry's point, I think that Ruth is acceptable as a Moabite because of her character. I think they still would have been maybe opposed to her ancestry, but because of her exemplary character, she's in the line. Same thing with
And-
Tamar. Tamar's foreign as well.
If Ruth were a story told during David's reign, he would have to be saying it's okay for me to have a Moabite ancestress because she had the hesed, you know, the loyalty. Yeah, I think a lot of this story it's either during David's reign, and I think John Jackson talked to this at the beginning, or during the Ezra Nehemiah, where they were having to send their foreign wives back home. But there might be a reason to keep them, you know. So
Well,
okay,
and I think,
yeah.
if I can make a comment, I think, you know, tying into what you're saying, the book's already emphasized that Ruth has said to Naomi, your God will be my God. So in the story, we already have Ruth, the convert, if we can use that term. And so that also, along with her character, I mean, her loyalty is certainly essential to all this, is her declaration that she is going to be a follower of the God of Naomi. And that's the central issue, really, in the days of Ezra. Ezra's concern, whatever you think of Ezra, Ezra's concern is that intermarriage is going to lead Israelite men to worship other gods, which is what led to the exile in the first place that Ezra is kind of responding to. But the story of Ruth says, why does it have to go that direction? Why can't it go the other direction? Why can't the foreign wives like Ruth become followers of the Lord?
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the structure of that language where they're talking about comparison with Rachel and Leah. That's really a prayer language, isn't it? May the Lord grant that the woman who is coming into your household be like Rachel and Leah. So this is prayer language that she might fit into that mold, which is really, really kind of nice language.
Yeah.
I think it's heavily a prayer for fertility. May she bear children.
Yeah.
May she bear children like Rachel and Leah and like Tamar. These are the ancestresses of the people of Judah and of the people of Bethlehem. And so may she be the next one. And then
Well, in fact,
surprise ending about that ancestry at the end.
Yeah, and in fact, in CEB, the next sentence is quite explicit. May you be fertile in Ephrathah, and may you preserve a name in Bethlehem, that fertility language, assuming CEB is translating that correctly. Pretty explicit.
Yes. Well, let's go on to Tamar and Judah. Um, so this is another is it Levirate marriage, sort of. It never really was a marriage, but a Levirate situation. I think that. Do you think that's why they are added in there? Is there more to that? Also, she like Ruth sort of made it happen.
Well, she was determined to have descendants for sure.
Yeah.
Against the odds.
Yeah, and took it into her own,
Yeah.
Figured out how it could happen, and did it.
She found a way.
Yes. But here she is in this blessing.
And she's also a foreign woman. She's a Canaanite.
Didn't know that. Thank you.
That's really important. I mean, that's a really important reference both here and then in Matthew. When Matthew lists 4 women in Jesus' genealogy, at least 3 of them, and arguably all 4 of the women mentioned, are foreign women.
Yeah. Is Bathsheba, you think, is foreign?
Pardon?
You think Bathsheba was foreign?
It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, she's married to a foreigner. We have at least that. We can say that. And there's some questions about the way her genealogy is described. But all the other women are foreign.
Yeah.
Rather fortunate for David that he has a Moabite ancestress. And in 1 Samuel 22, when David is hiding in the caves and trying to stay away from Saul, he has to take care of his parents. And he sent his parents to the king of Moab and asked the king of Moab to take care of his parents. So he has this Moabite card to play.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he ruins it later. I mean, said he made the Moabite after a battle, made the Moabites lay down, put a cord over them, put cords over a certain number of them, killed 2 cords worth, left 1 alive, killed 2 cords worth, left 1 alive. Ruth has such a happy ending if you don't read Samuel. Just leave it at that. In fact, the commentaries I was reading called Ruth a comedy, and a comedy in like Shakespeare's comedies where terrible things happen and then it all comes out right in the end. And it makes for a great story. I'm going to read verse 13 because it just sort of moves the narrative along. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. Pretty necessary, but nothing we didn't see coming. Now this next part, Liesl, would you read? Let me see, 14 through 17, and this is what happens after the birth.
Sure. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given them birth." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son." and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Okay, there's a lot in there. I So this better to thee than 7 sons. The daughter-in-law that is better to thee than 7 sons. What is this?
A compliment to Ruth.
One good woman
Compliment.
for 7 men.
Would that be in that the way she has provided for Naomi? Because they're not talking to Ruth. They're talking to Naomi.
No, I think, I don't know, if you read into this, the book of Ruth seems to be applying the Levirate marriage law to this situation, I think. And in that case, the baby would really be Naomi's, because she lost her husband and her heirs as well. And so I guess the story is trying to revert Ruth's son to be the actual replacement son for Elimelech, who died.
And this would help David also with that ancestress who is a Moabite. Because Naomi, at first when it said she took the child to her bosom, I thought, well, this means she just loved it. But then the next one says she nurses it, and that kind of tells me that Ruth kind of disappears here. And we've just got the baby and Naomi.
She's a grandma.
Yeah.
I have
Grandma. This is a grandma story, if ever there was one.
Yeah.
I've seen these people at work. I've seen potential grandmas at work. You all know what this is like. My question, I mean, obviously she can't physically nurse the child because
Maybe she can't.
that's going to be happen. So maybe better, it's probably better. I mean, physically she's not going to be able to nurse the child. That's not biologically a thing that would happen. As far as, now, I'm not an expert on biology,
I've heard of it.
it would be extremely rare. But simply that she acted as the nurse, I think, is probably the sense here.
So you think it's just means she changed the diapers?
Well, she did a lot more than that.
The CEV translates it, she became his guardian, the child's guardian. However, and I'm not looking at original language at all. It struck me that it ends on Naomi, partly because the story started with Naomi. It's, we start with Naomi's difficulty, and she becomes bitter, Mara, and then at some point now it ends, as Liz was saying, with the comedy ending, all things are good. This kind of finally returns back as suggesting, and she's finally okay. She now has another child, and this is a grandchild, but I don't think it's suggesting somehow Ruth's out of the picture, but rather that things are great for Naomi.
I have 2 things to say. One, my study Bible suggests that Naomi's action symbolized that she has adopted the child. So I don't know if that's another kind of legal tradition that I have no idea and have no awareness of. But that's what my study Bible suggests. And the second thing is, Mark, I think you're exactly right. I'm married to a storyteller, and he always says there are 2 kinds of characters. There's a pebble character where you throw it up against a wall and it just stays the same. And then you have a putty character where you throw it up against the wall, the hardship, something, and it changes. It changes shape and it adapts to that situation. And Ruth and most stories are about those putty kind of characters. You know, Ruth is a pebble character. She stays the same. She's constant. But Naomi is the one who undergoes great crisis and transformation and is the one who learns the lesson. So I would agree with you where this story is about Naomi.
It seems to me that the whole book is a book that engenders hope. It engenders the hope that things are, maybe bad now, but the story's not over yet. And Naomi, when we begin the book, Naomi is desperate and she believes the Lord has forsaken her. And but the story's not over, and it winds up changing radically for her. It's the kind of story that sort of gives hope that maybe my story may change too. Maybe there are brighter days in the future. Maybe God has not really forsaken me. It seems that it functions that way for me. I don't know for other people, but
could I ask another question? And maybe somebody's got a good answer, but it strikes me pretty unusual that that Ruth's child is not named by her or by Boaz, but by the neighborhood women.
They're grandmas. I mean, I think this is really, it's a story, and I think it would be really dangerous to read too much. Like Lisa mentions, is there a hidden legal tradition here about adoption? If so, it's the only thing like this we have. And so I'm always really suspect of biblical interpreters, of whom I am one, who will take singular instances of things because we have, such a small pool of evidence. And I'm not criticizing Lisa, it's the comment from the study Bible, is that we have a tendency to take singular instances of things and then try to reconstruct what a whole legal system might have been around it. And to me, this story reads, it's a well-told story. And it's a well-told story that rings true to life. That's why, I facetiously not really say the whole grandma thing, because to me, the whole ending of this story seems like the story of people who've gone through this incredible hardship, and something amazing has happened. And so we turn our gaze back to Naomi and her friends, and in their more advanced age, when it looked like Naomi had no prospects for her own future or the future of her family, this wonderful things happened. And Ruth and Boaz, they can have all the date nights they want because grandma's there, and grandma's gonna revel in the joy of this wonderful experience. To me, in the story, that's what I hear.
It struck me, John, not so much the grandma issue. I would have expected that maybe from Naomi, but the fact that all the neighbor women name him, to me, suggested how their acceptance. That, in other words, that also amongst this group of women, that they give him the name. And notice this, it's an important name, one who serves. So they're basically giving him kind of a titular name, some kind of an important name. But it suggests to me acceptance.
It has the men at the gate and accepting the relationship. It has the women after the birth accepting the baby. It says these are community people. These are our people. They're not, and instead of Ruth the Moabite from Moab, they're assimilated into the community, which is I think big for Israel.
I had 2 points to make about that. One thing is in verse 13, the narrator says the Lord made Ruth conceive. And there is, depending on how you define how long the family was in Moab, there's a suggestion that she might have been married for 10 years without ever having a child, because apparently neither Orpah nor Ruth have a child when they leave to go back with Naomi. So verse 13 might be more significant than we think. And Craig had a point about the naming thing. Go ahead.
Well, it reminded me the story of the birth of John the Baptist, when the community sort of wanted to give him the name after his father, and
That's
the
right.
father vetoes that and says, no, he'll be John.
Yeah.
Huh. So that is a community. Cool.
John Jackson, do you think that the name Obed is short for Obed Yahweh? Do you think that that would have been the understanding of it, that he's the servant, specifically the servant of the Lord?
I have no opinion on that.
Whoa.
Obadiah.
Wow. I feel.
I mean, we, as Ted said, we have an example of a name, which is basically that, Obadiah, but that isn't what we have here.
Uh-huh.
So, I haven't thought about it.
Well, does anybody want to read a genealogy?
Absolutely.
Barry, I was thinking you. I don't know.
I'm sorry, you were.
Barry, you want to read the genealogy at the end?
Oh.
It's 2 verses, maybe
Okay.
3.
All right.
When we were in elementary school, we had to memorize the genealogy from Adam to Jesus Christ. So he can handle this.
Whoa.
Which one? Which one? The Luke one.
Luke or
Must be
Matthew.
the Luke one. Okay.
Yeah. If it's got Adam, it's got to be Luke.
It's got to be the Luke one.
I don't know, but I can go further on it now than he can. We'll check and let you know.
All right, starting with verse 18.
Yes.
Yeah. This then is the family line of Peretz. Peretz was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, or Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nashon. I'm using my elementary school pronunciation here.
That's fine.
Nashon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David.
Lovely. I would like to read to you, I don't know if you can see, this is Martin Luther's Christmas book. And he starts with the Annunciation is the first chapter, and he talks about a genealogy. Our Lord Jesus Christ was born of a line of ancestors whom the evangelist Matthew arranges with artistry into 3 groups of 14 patriarchs, 14 kings, and 14 princes. Among the latter were a number of disreputable characters, as we learn from the Book of Kings, and there were no savory women. God holds before us a mirror of sinners, that we may know that he is sent to sinners, and from sinners is willing to be born. Which I thought was lovely, although I was giving Ruth the benefit of the doubt. We can't all marry nuns, you know. But I thought that was just a lovely thing, and I read it while I was studying Ruth, so it meant a lot to me.
I had it pointed out to me one time that, at least for modern readers, some modern readers, this book kind of functions like Paul Harvey's little segment called The Rest of the Story, where he tells a story and you really don't get the significance of it till he comes back on after commercial break and gives you the rest of the story. And the fact that this child is the ancestor of David is
the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Barry, we're dating ourselves on that. I've
I
run
know.
that by students. They have no clue what I'm talking about. Zero.
He knew he was in a
I may
good
as well be
crowd.
talking
I
Greek.
knew that y'all would know.
I love my old friends.
Every one of you.
Well, maybe one or two.
Even Meg, even though
Yeah.
she and Craig, even though they're and Mary's young.
Lisa.
John, Lisa, sorry.
No.
I know who Paul Harvey is, so.
Excellent. Studied your history, did you?
No, I used to listen to him on the radio on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah, Lisa's probably right on the cusp of
Does it strike anybody as strange that this genealogy begins with Perez? Why not go back to Judah?
It is curious, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because Judah was a cad, and he wouldn't have relationships with. He wouldn't take care of Tamar. That's why. Or at least Judah's sons were both cads. all these
Judah
sons.
is the anti-Boaz, I guess.
Well, and it does in verse 12 also refer to the house of Perez.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
seems to be, for whatever reason, the initiation point.
Well, it's possible that, Judah has multiple children, and so there are going to be different lines coming from Judah, one would presume.
Maybe
And
the
so
Bethlehem
over in Bethlehem, it's, we're the Perez branch of the family. Now, I don't know, but just that we start with Perez is directly mentioned in both places is just really interesting.
This concern, this sort of tension between, that you see in Ezra with excluding foreigners, and then the sort of the opposite sort of, narrative that you get in Ruth, kind of reminds me a little bit of the kind of tension that I felt in the church that I grew up in, because people generally felt like that Christian children really ought to marry other Christians. And that was taught. It was taught as being wise, and that's really what you should do. But then on the other hand, there were many couples in our church where one spouse, usually the man, the husband, was a Christian because he had married a woman who was a Christian, and then he eventually became a Christian. So, and people felt good about that. I mean, they knew that sort of thing happens. So I don't know. It's a similar kind of tension, it seems to me, between.
It is, and another thing, I think it plays into what's going on with us now with the immigrants and the minorities. It's very relevant.
Mm-hmm.
How do we treat people who come from another country? How do we treat minorities? It's a powerful book for right now.
One of getting back to Barry, this tension between Ezra and Ruth. One of the things that I try to emphasize to my students is an example where the canon of Scripture does contain these internal tensions, maybe even contradictions a bit. And we need to learn to hear the big story of multiple books and multiple issues. There's a tendency for us to get very narrow focus and think we know this answer, the answer here. And this inclusion in the canon is a way of kind of saying it's oftentimes both and. We live in tension, and that's actually good, I think. It breaks us up from the very narrow focus.
In Ruth, they already had laws in Deuteronomy saying, you don't deal with Moabites at all. And then they had things about how to treat a foreigner. So they were having to pick and choose. Even back during those times, they were having to pick and choose their scriptures, which people don't like, you know. Do it.
But it becomes very Jewish later as Jewish interpreters are trying to deal with all of this. They have to deal with those tensions all the time. And so when you read rabbinic literature, it's full of disagreement. And often that literature doesn't solve the disagreement. You'll have two points of view put up side by side with no resolution because both of those were live, active perspectives. And, you know, part of your becoming a wise person was learning to see both sides and then decide for yourself, your community, how to conduct your lives based on it.
You know, John, I was interested in your talk about the placement of Ruth in the Old Testament, and
we have less than a minute, John, so you're going to have to make this real fast.
Judges, Ruth, Samuel gives you one book showing, in between two that show a lot of deception, mistrust, lies, and death, murder. And Ruth's one of those three that really sticks out as being positive.
In the midst of the worst kind of political and social chaos, there are people who are people of faithfulness.
And good people.
Look for the helpers, I guess we should say.
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Oh,
Thanks,